Hi everyone, E.G. Spirit here. So today I'm going to talk about beware of people with dead eyes. And by that I mean people who have these eyes that don't match their expression or their face or how they're putting themselves out into the world. And you'd know it if you saw it. I'm sure you guys have seen people with these eyes. And I always think that the inspiration for talking about this today was I was thinking about how, if you remember the movie Jaws back in the mid 70s, that the captain played by Robert Shaw, the character, the guy who had the boat, and they went out looking for the shark. This was the original Jaws. And he was telling him the story this night that they were drinking in the cabin of the boat. And he was telling him about how he'd been on the Indianapolis and what had happened to the sailors and the sharks that had come in and basically, massacred, a lot of the sailors that night. Well, not just one night, I guess it was over several nights. But anyway, he talked about the lifeless eyes. He said these sharks had dead eyes, lifeless eyes. There was no soul. And at the time it really struck me, but I've always thought about that because then at that time in my life, I had not really met anyone with eyes like that. But as I got older, I did encounter people with eyes like that. And it was a very sobering thought because sharks, it has no reflection on whether the shark is a good or bad shark. A shark is a shark. It's not, their eyes are just, it's just built that way. It doesn't show any emotion in their eyes. But humans are different. They always say that eyes are the windows to the soul, and I believe that to some degree that's true. And so when you look in someone's eyes and you just see this darkness, and I don't mean by the color of their eye. I mean just this deadness, this lack of warmth, this lack of empathy, caring, like all these things are just lacking in their eyes. Now, admittedly, some people can have very dull eyes because maybe they have mental illness or maybe they have severe physical illness. That's different. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about people that in every other respect are healthy, normal people, but their eyes are dead. And, I'll give you one example of a famous person like this. I've actually met, and I don't want to discuss this one because this person happens to still be alive, but I did meet a famous person one time that did have eyes like that. And it really shook me because, they were smiling and they shook my hand and I looked into their eyes and there was like just no humanity there is the only way I can describe it. So I actually have met a famous person who shall remain nameless who actually had eyes like that. But I also remember, and I'll talk about this one because this famous person has passed. But I remember O.J. Simpson, and I never met him in person. But what I remember is, if you can remember everything that came up about, when he was arrested for the murder of his ex-wife and the guy that she was with and that whole trial. If you followed all that, you know what I'm talking about. Well, anyway, I had watched O.J. Simpson for many years, back from when he was playing football, and also then he became a commentator in broadcasting. And I remember I was really into football early in my life. And I remember my boyfriend and I used to watch, football every weekend during the fall. And this was before his whole, arrest and trial thing happened. And I remember increasingly, I started noticing that when he was, smiling or whatever and talking about the game or down on the field or whatever, and you'd see him, he had this, beautiful smile and he seemed like, but for some reason, I would look at his eyes, even on the television, you could see it. I would look at his eyes and I'd go, what's going on there? And he had those dead eyes. And I remember pointing it out to my boyfriend. Again, this is before the whole, kerfuffle with all the stuff that went on. And I pointed it out to my boyfriend, and he started paying attention to him, and he said, "You're right. His eyes don't match how he's behaving." And I go, "I know." And you can even see it, on the television, which was real. I mean, imagine in person seeing that. So, and of course, then the whole thing happened where he was arrested and put on trial and all that. And then, his reputation was basically ruined the rest of his life. But I think about that and I think, what's with and now that's two famous people I'm aware of. There's probably more, I'm sure. But what's with the dead eyes? But I've seen it for myself in the average person as well. You'll meet this person and you start talking to them and, they might smile or they're laughing and you realize that their eyes are just, there's nothing, and I don't mean no intelligence there. There's no warmth there. There's no humanity. I call it humanity. There's no sense of humanity. So is that a tell for somebody who's truly evil? Possibly. Possibly it is. I think maybe there are still evil people, though, that can even, pretend that. Like somehow it can come forth through their eyes, even though they're horrible people and they're really evil. Now, do I think truly evil people are commonplace? No. I think they're relatively rare. I think I have met a few. Usually it's not just the eyes when you're with somebody who's truly evil. You feel it about them. You just feel it about who they are. I had a family member that I didn't meet. I think I met him when he was a child, but I didn't meet him as an adult until I was probably mid to late 30s. And I went with my mother to pick him up from the airport. And I was chilled in seeing him because he had those eyes. And it was weird because my mother, who was also she was very intuitive and very sensitive about stuff. She and I talked about it later. Like we had picked him up and we took him somewhere. And, but later when we were alone or when we talked, we both had a bad feeling about this person. Isn't that interesting? And so I think that, people, it often shows up in your eyes, but it doesn't necessarily. So there are people that can fool you and they have really warm, maybe they can, it's like putting on a mask, they can put on this mask and seem like they're a warm person. Now, am I saying that everybody who does bad things is evil? Not at all. A lot of people do bad things and they're not bad people. In fact, they may be troubled people, they may be abused people, they may be suffering from addictions, there may be all kinds of problems that make them do things that are, bad. That doesn't make them evil. When I'm talking about an evil person, I'm talking about somebody that it's a whole difference in sensation that you get in being around them. It's like when you're around something like that, you just want to literally run the other way. Like you just don't even want to be in that person's presence. That's actually how I was with that famous person I met, that I was so taken off guard by it that I didn't even want to be near that person. So when you sense that in somebody, this really, really bad quality, you just don't even want to be around them. And you probably shouldn't, because if somebody really has that kind of evil, no good can come of being around them. It just would be horrible. But you have, some people are more sensitive to this than others. You might want to share your experience in the comments below if you've met people that you felt were really, truly evil, and what your reaction to that was, whether you sensed it or not, what you did as a result of that. But I wanted to share it on this spirit channel instead of my regular channel, because I feel like it's much more of a topic related to intuition and sensing and even spirituality. Because some people don't believe that there's evil, and some people believe there's way more evil than there is. You know, when I was living in California at the senior apartments I did, there was a man there. He passed away about, I think about a year and a half ago. And he had kind of, he was not evil himself, but he had kind of fried his brain with LSD in early life, like in his 20s or 30s, and so I think that had a lot to do with this, you know, kind of focus he had, shall we say. But he was convinced that there were demons all around all the time. Like anytime you talked to him and said that such and such happened to you or somebody else or whatever, he would instantly say, well, it's the demons. And I really believe that a lot of this was due to the LSD that he had taken too much of, because, you know, it stays in your system for a long time. And so I think he actually, in his mind, he really did see demons everywhere. But I don't personally believe that. I don't believe that that's the issue. But I do believe that there is evil in the universe. I believe there is evil in other dimensions. I believe there are people on the earth who carry that evil in them for whatever reason, whether, you know, in some cases it could be possession. In some ways it could just be that they're carrying something from another dimension, and it just kind of permeated them as a human. I don't really know the cause. I just know it exists. I've felt it, I've seen it, I've seen the dead eyes. So let me know if you've experienced that yourself. It's an interesting topic for discussion, but anyway, until next time, be well and be kind. Take care.